He slapped me at 11:47 p.m. in our kitchen, over a plate of cold rice he never touched. And 10 minutes later, I was the one standing over him, calm, quiet, holding 4 envelopes that would end everything he thought he owned. My name is Alina Marsh. I was 34 years old, and for 9 years, I built my husband's life with my own 2 hands, while he made sure I never forgot my place in it. I want to tell you about the night everything broke, but to understand why I didn't cry when he raised his hand to me, why I didn't scream, why I just stood there, still, like something inside me had already left the room. I have to take you back. Back to how it started. Back to who I used to be before I learned how to disappear inside my own house. I met Daniel Marsh at a work conference in Chicago. I was 25, hungry for a life that felt like it mattered. And he was magnetic, confident in a way that made a room bend toward him. He complimented my work before he complimented my face, and back then, that felt like respect. It felt like he saw me. I didn't know yet that men like Daniel see everyone. They just decide, early on, what use you'll be to them. We married a year later. Small wedding. My mother cried the good kind of tears. My father shook Daniel's hand and said, "Take care of her." And Daniel smiled that smile, the one that made strangers trust him instantly, and said, "Always." For the first 2 years, I almost believed him. Almost. The changes came slow. That's the part nobody warns you about. How slow it is. It's not a switch. It's a drip. A comment here. A silence there. He started correcting me in front of friends. Small things. The wrong wine pairing. The wrong route to a restaurant. Nothing worth fighting over. Until it was everything worth fighting over. Until I stopped talking in rooms full of people, because I was tired of being corrected in front of them. Then came the business. Daniel opened a private investment firm when I was 28. Marsh Capital Advisory. And I was the one who built its foundation. Though almost nobody outside our house ever knew that. I have a background in financial law, contracts, compliance. The unglamorous architecture that keeps a company from collapsing into lawsuits. I drafted his operating agreements. I built his client onboarding structure. I caught 2 compliance violations in his first 18 months that would have ended him if they'd gone to regulators. He called me his secret weapon, back then. In private. Never once in public. People don't need to know how the sausage gets made, Elena. He told me once, laughing, like it was a joke between us. They just need to trust the man serving it. I laughed too. God help me, I laughed. Because that's what you do, isn't it? When you love someone, and you're still convinced the good years are just around the corner, waiting for you to be patient enough to reach them. By the time I turned 30, Marsh Capital Advisory managed almost $60 million for private clients. Daniel became the man people pointed at during dinner parties. That's Daniel Marsh. The finance guy, brilliant. And I became the woman standing quietly beside him. holding a glass of wine I rarely drank, smiling the way you smile when you've practiced it in a mirror. Nobody at those parties knew I still reviewed every major contract before it went out. Nobody knew I flagged the fraudulent asset valuations that came through with a rise. Group account in our third year. In a memo Daniel Reed frowned at and then filed away in a drawer instead of a compliance report. It's a gray area, he told me. It's not illegal, Elena. It's aggressive accounting. I remember staring at him for a long moment, feeling something cold settle low in my stomach. I remember thinking, this is the moment. This is the fork in the road. And I remember choosing, God forgive me, to stay quiet. Because I was scared. Because I loved him. Because some small, foolish part of me still believed that loving him meant protecting him from himself. I kept copies of that memo anyway. I don't fully know, even now, why I did that. Some instinct in me, some quiet animal sense, understood something my heart wasn't ready to accept yet. Over the years, that instinct saved my life. I started keeping records. Not out of some grand plan for revenge. I want to be honest with you, it was never that at first. It was survival. It was the same reason you keep a flashlight in a house where the power keeps going out. I copied emails. I saved bank transfer confirmations. I photographed documents late at night while Daniel slept beside me, breathing evenly, dreaming, I imagine, of nothing at all. Because men like him rarely dream of the people they hurt. By our 7th year of marriage, I had built a second life inside the walls of my own home. A quiet archive of everything Daniel Marsh didn't want the world to see. I told myself it was insurance. Just in case. I didn't yet know what just in case would come to mean. The cracks in our marriage became canyons around that time. Daniel started staying out later. Business dinners, he said. Client entertainment. I stopped asking questions somewhere around year 6. Not because I stopped caring, but because I learned that every question I asked came back to me, wrapped in irritation. In that particular tone he used, when he wanted me to feel small for wanting the truth. Why do you always have to make everything an interrogation, Elena? I just want to know where you were, Daniel. I was working. Jesus, is that a crime now? It wasn't the words. It was never just the words. It was the tone underneath them. The way he could make me feel guilty for the simple act of asking my own husband a simple question. I started noticing the perfume before I let myself admit what it meant. Sweet, floral, unfamiliar. It clung to his collars sometimes, faint, but there. I noticed the phone he started keeping face down on the nightstand, a habit he never had before. I noticed how he'd walk into another room to take certain calls, keeping his voice low, always low, like a man handling something fragile that might shatter if I heard it clearly. I noticed everything. I said nothing. Because I was still building my archive. Still gathering the pieces of a puzzle I hadn't fully understood I was assembling. Her name, I eventually learned, was Priya Chandrasekaran. She was 29. She worked as a marketing consultant for Marsh Capital Advisory, hired 18 months earlier for a contract that, I would later discover, was never approved through proper channels. Daniel signed off on her retainer himself. $60,000 a year for services that, as far as I could ever determine, produced almost nothing measurable for the company. I found the first message by accident. His laptop, left open on the kitchen counter one evening while he showered, an email thread he'd forgotten to close. I wasn't looking for it. I want you to understand that. I wasn't some jealous wife hunting for proof of what she already suspected. I was seating up a client compliance form he'd asked me to prepare that same night. And there it was, glowing on the screen in his own words. I miss you already, and you just left. I stood in my own kitchen, in the house I'd helped pay off, in the marriage I'd spent 9 years defending even to myself, and I felt something inside my chest go very, very quiet. Not loud. Not explosive. Quiet. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't cry, not right away. I closed the laptop gently, the way you'd close a door on a room you never wanted to walk back into. And I went to bed beside a man who had, in that exact moment, become a stranger wearing my husband's face. Over the following months, I gathered everything. Every message. Every hotel receipt buried in an expense account he thought I'd never audit. Every wire transfer to an account under Priya's name that had nothing to do with marketing services and everything to do with buying her silence or her loyalty or both. I found evidence that the Rays Group fraud I'd flagged years earlier had grown, quietly, into something much larger. Inflated portfolio valuations reported to at least 11 clients, numbers that existed only on paper, propping up a firm that was, underneath its polished surface, hollowing out from within. I organized it all. 4 categories. 4 case files. I printed them, sealed them into 4 separate envelopes, and hid them in a place Daniel would never think to look. Inside a box of my late mother's recipe cards. In the back of our garage storage unit, because I knew my husband well enough to know he'd never once, in 9 years, shown interest in anything that reminded him. He married a woman with a family, a history, a mother who died believing her daughter had found her happily ever after. I carried those envelopes, like a secret heartbeat, for almost a year. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. The truth, though, the truth I can only admit to you now, looking back, is that some wounded part of me was still hoping I'd never have to use them. Some small, aching, humiliated part of me kept whispering, maybe he'll stop. Maybe he'll choose you. Maybe if you just wait a little longer. That part of me died on a Tuesday night in March. In our kitchen. Over a plate of rice that had gone cold 3 hours earlier. I'd been out later than usual. A work event for my part. Time consulting clients. Nothing scandalous. Nothing hidden. Just dinner with 2 colleagues that ran long, because one of them was going through a divorce and needed someone to listen. I texted Daniel. I called when he didn't answer. I walked through our front door at 11:41 p.m., already rehearsing an apology I didn't owe. He was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, a single light above the stove throwing shadows across his face. And I remember, even now, how still he was. How wrong that stillness felt. "Where were you?" he said. Not a question. A verdict already reached. "I told you, dinner with Grace and Simone. Her divorce, remember? I texted you." "I don't care what you texted me." His voice was low, and that low voice used to make me flinch preemptively, brace before the blow of his disappointment even landed. "You knew I had a headache. You knew I needed you here. Daniel, it's almost midnight. I'm exhausted. Can we just—" "You always do this." He stood up. The chair scraped against the tile. A sound I still hear sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and my mind wanders back uninvited. "You always put everyone else first. Your friends. Your work. Everyone but me. That's not fair. And you know it's not fair, considering—" I didn't get to finish the sentence. His hand moved so fast, I didn't have time to flinch. The sound of it landed somewhere between a slap and a silence. Sharp, humiliating, final. My cheek burned. My ears rang with something that wasn't quite sound. And for one long, suspended second, neither of us moved. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And do you know what I felt in that moment? Standing in my own kitchen with my face throbbing and 9 years of my life collapsing quietly around me. I felt nothing. Not fear, not even God help me, surprise. I felt relief. Because the waiting was finally over. I straightened my back. I didn't touch my cheek, though it burned, though tears were building somewhere behind my eyes, refusing, for once, to fall. "Elena," Daniel said, and his voice had already changed, already softened into that practiced, familiar shape of remorse he wore so well. "Elena, I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Sit down," I said. Not loud. I didn't need loud anymore. Something in my voice must have reached him, because he sat. 9 years of marriage, and I don't think he'd ever heard that particular tone from me before. Flat. Certain, utterly without tremor. I walked to the garage. My hands were steady in a way that almost frightened me. Steady the way a surgeon's hands are steady, or a soldier's. Someone who has rehearsed a moment so many times in their mind that when it finally arrives, the body simply knows what to do. I found the box of my mother's recipe cards. Exactly where I'd left it. Exactly where it had waited for nearly a year for a night I'd hoped would never come. I pulled out the 4 envelopes. When I walked back into the kitchen, Daniel was still sitting at the table, holding an ice pack against nothing. Some reflexive performance of the injured party. And when he saw my face, whatever apology he'd been rehearsing died somewhere in his throat. "What is that?" he said. I set the 4 envelopes on the table in front of him, one by one. Slowly, I wanted him to feel the weight of each one landing, Envelope 1, I said, is every message between you and Priya Chandrasekaran, going back 14 months. Envelope 2 is every wire, transfer you made to her personal account disguised as marketing consultancy fees. $60,000 a year for a job. She barely performed. Envelope 3 is the Raise group file. Every inflated valuation you've reported to 11 different clients over the past 4 years. And Envelope 4. My voice caught? Just slightly. Just once. And I let it, because I was done pretending to be stronger than I felt. Envelope 4 is every compliance violation I flagged for you personally, in writing, that you buried instead of reporting. Every single one has my signature and the date I sent it to you. Which means, Daniel, that I have spent years proving, in writing, that I tried to stop you. And you have spent years proving, in writing, that you chose not to listen. He didn't move. His face had gone the color of old paper. Elena, he said, and his voice cracked around my name in a way that, a year earlier, might have broken something open in me. It didn't anymore. Elena, you don't understand what you're? I understand perfectly, I said. I built this company with you. I know exactly what's in those envelopes because I lived it. I documented it because some part of me always knew this day was coming, long before I let myself admit it. If you take this to anyone, I lose everything. The firm. His hand actually trembled, reaching toward the envelopes, and then stopped, like he was afraid to touch them. Afraid they might detonate. Lose everything. Elena, this is our life too. No, I said. And here, finally, my voice did shake, but with something closer to strength than sorrow. This was never our life, Daniel. It was your life. I was just the woman standing quietly beside it, catching everything you dropped. He tried anger next, because that was always his second language. Right after charm. You're going to destroy me over this. Over some texts, over a business decision, you don't even fully understand. I understand accounting fraud, Daniel. I have a degree in it. I built your compliance department. I know exactly what those valuations mean. And so will the SEC. When I send them everything tomorrow morning. The silence that followed felt endless. The kind of silence that has weight. That presses down on your chest until you're not sure you remember how to breathe normally. You wouldn't. He finally said, quieter now, and something in that quiet, that shift toward pleading, told me he already knew I would. I already have a lawyer, I said. I met with her 3 weeks ago. Everything is already prepared. The only reason I hadn't sent it yet was because some foolish, exhausted part of me was still hoping you'd become a man worth staying married to. I watched something collapse behind his eyes, some final wall giving way. And for one strange moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then my cheek throbbed again, a dull, insistent reminder, and the pity evaporated as quickly as it had come. You hit me tonight? I said. Over rice, Daniel. Over rice going cold on a plate. Do you understand how small that is? Do you understand that I have spent 9 years of my life shrinking myself smaller and smaller so that you would never have to feel anything except comfortable? He didn't answer. There wasn't an answer. Not really. Not one that would have meant anything at that point. I picked my purse back up off the counter. The same purse I'd walked in carrying 20 minutes earlier. Back when I was still someone else. Still a woman. Rehearsing an apology for coming home late. I'm staying at my sister's tonight, I said. Tomorrow, my lawyer will be in contact with yours. I'd suggest you get one, if you don't already. Elena, please. His voice cracked fully this time. Genuine, I think, in its own broken way, though I no longer had the strength to care whether it was genuine or not. Please. We can fix this. We can talk about this. We're not fixing anything, I said, and I meant it with a calm that surprised even me. You're going to face what you built. And I'm finally going to stop carrying it for you. I walked out of that kitchen, and I did not look back. Though I felt his eyes on me the entire way, felt the specific weight of a man, watching his whole carefully constructed world quietly. Walk out the front door, in a coat still smelling faintly of someone else's dinner. The following months unfolded exactly the way you might imagine, though living through them felt slower, heavier, more exhausting than any imagining could have prepared me for. The SSC investigation into Marsh Capital Advisory became public within 6 weeks. Reporters used words like elaborate fraud and years of deception. Daniel's face appeared in a business journal photograph, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him look in real life. His confident magnetism drained away, replaced by the hollow expression of a man finally understanding the size of what he'd lost. 11 clients filed suit. 2 of them I genuinely liked. Over the years, dinner guests who used to laugh at Daniel's jokes and compliment his vision. I felt a complicated grief for their losses. Real grief, even as I understood I bore no responsibility for what he'd done to them. Priya Chandrasekaran, I later learned, testified against him in exchange for a reduced role in the proceedings. I don't know what I expected to feel about her, but mostly, in the end, I just felt tired. She was another woman he'd used and would have eventually discarded. Another person who believed, for a while, that Daniel Marsh's attention meant something more than it did. The divorce finalized 8 months after that night in the kitchen. I didn't ask for much. I didn't need his money. Not really. Not once the truth of where so much of it came from became clear. I asked for the house, since I'd paid half of it, and needed somewhere to rebuild something that felt like mine. I asked to keep my maiden name back, Elena Castellano, a name that felt, when I said it out loud again, for the first time in 9 years, like slipping into a coat that had always fit. Daniel pled guilty to securities fraud 11 months later. He received a sentence far lighter than I believed he deserved, though I've learned, slowly, painfully, that the world rarely delivers the justice you feel entitled to. He served 14 months. When he was released, I heard he moved to another state, started over under smaller circumstances, a smaller life to match. I suppose the smaller man he'd finally been revealed to be. I think about that night often, the kitchen, the cold rice, the sound of his hand against my face. I think about how close I came to never opening those envelopes at all. How easily fear and habit and hope can keep a person trapped in a life, quietly killing them. But I think, more than anything, about the woman I became after. The one who learned that documentation isn't paranoia. It's protection. That love should never require your own erasure. That the quietest people in the room are sometimes the ones paying the closest attention. Gathering, piece by piece, the proof of exactly who someone really is, long before that someone believes themselves capable of being caught. I rebuilt my consulting practice from that house. Slowly. Honestly. I specialize now in financial compliance for small firms, helping people build the very systems Daniel once asked me to overlook. There's a particular satisfaction in that. In turning 9 years of silenced expertise into something that protects other people instead of covering for the man who exploited it. Some nights, I still catch myself flinching at raised voices, a habit my body hasn't fully unlearned. But most nights now, I sleep without dreaming of kitchens, without dreaming of cold rice or trembling hands, or a man's face collapsing under the weight of his own choices. I dream instead of quiet mornings, of a life that finally, completely, belongs to no one but me. He slapped me because I came home late. 10 minutes later, I handed him the truth. And it cost him everything he ever pretended to be.